What up, what up, what up? Hey, everybody, hope you're doing well. Hey, I just want to let you know, I know everybody can't always support and donate to the podcast, but hey, if you can do a one-time donation, I put up a Buy Me a Coffee link in this description of the podcast. So if you go to the description of the podcast, it'll be at the bottom, and you can just go to that link, and you can buy me a cup of coffee, or two if you want. And that would just help support the show, and I can wake up a little bit more and bring you more info. So thanks for listening to the podcast. If you can donate, that would be much appreciated. And let's get on to the show. What up, what up, what up? Welcome back to Lockdown Universe, home of the bizarre, peculiar, and unheard of stories of UFO legend and paranormal lore. Welcome back, welcome back. Happy to be back. Hopefully you guys are doing excellent and taking care of yourselves. So today I wanted to talk to you about CADY Smith. Now, this story comes to us from the Cosmic Disclosure program on Gaia, and through Mr. Richard Doty, who was an Air Force Office of Special Investigations officer, engaged and recruited Mrs. CADY Smith, who we shall title Professor X. Now, if you're familiar with X-Men and the CADY and Professor X, you'll know that Professor X does what? He can communicate. He can communicate with all of the X-Men and find them somewhere on the world. And guess what? Richard Doty and the Air Force Office of Special Investigations found their Professor X in CADY Smith. Now, you're probably asking me, how could they have possibly found her, and why would she let them find her? However, let's go to the beginning of the CADY Smith story. So CADY Smith, born in Montana. At the age of 3, she has engagements and encounters with aliens. Okay? Now, she starts to call them her friends, but she's not seeing them physically. They're always around her. Okay? So when we think about that, it could be interdimensional, extra-dimensional, right? Where they're always with her. Or some people might be worried that this poor girl's schizophrenic. But we'll get to that. So, she has these events when she's 3 years old where she says, Mom and Dad, hey, I was with my friends. She would go out and on these walks and be gone for a long time. She's like, her parents would be like, where'd you go? I was with my friends. She'd go out at night, look up into the evening stars, and with her parents, she could summon down a star to come very, very close to their location, and then it would beam off and away, and their parents would be like, well, how'd you do that? Well, they were my friends. So fast forward to when she's 10 years old, she's sent off to camp. She goes out with a friend for a walk, and she says, hey, I'm going to go talk to my friends. And the friend, her human friend who she's with, is like, okay, well, whatever. And all of a sudden, CADY disappears. Okay? She disappears. The human friend that she's with runs back to the camp, freaked out, grabs the camp counselor, who's only 20, and says, oh my God, CADY disappeared. And they ran back out into the woods, and they found her not where she had disappeared, but a little bit farther off. Well, camp counselor brought her to the infirmary. They checked her out. Everything's fine. But they did report it to police. Okay? So keep that in mind. They reported it to police. Later on, when she's 17, another big event happens. She decides that she wants to join the Air Force. She always wanted to join the Air Force. She thought, it would be cool, it would be fun, it would be interesting. It's something that she wanted to do for a long time. So she joins the U.S. Air Force. She takes the intelligence test. They put her into U.S. Air Force intelligence. They teach her linguistics. Okay, she goes to the intelligence operation course in Virginia. She goes to Russian language school. She learns that, and they send her to Berlin in the 80s, this is back in the 80s. They sent her to West Berlin in Germany to start spying on the Russians who might have influence in Germany. Okay, so this is really interesting. Her boss, who was a major, noticed immediately that Katie was different from anyone else. Not just because she, you know, was in intelligence, but she had a different way about her. She seemed to sense things. When they would go out on an operation, she would be able to tell what the Soviets were doing ahead of time before they could do that, before they could do what they were going to do, their actions, their activities. She was reading their minds, and she was reporting to her officer what was going on. So one day, after a big operation where they captured two Soviets, they entered an American-controlled building, and she was met by her superiors, and they said, "Hey, you did a great job last night. You know, how were you able to be so successful on this mission?" And she says, "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." And their superior officer's like, "Well, just try me." And she's like, "Okay." And she tells him, you know, and he thinks she's bonkers. So he sends her to get a psychological examination to the psych hospital through the military. She goes through all the psych testing. Then she goes to speak to a psychiatrist. Well, guess who the psychiatrist is at that hospital? None other than an Office of Special Investigations for the Air Force psychologist. Okay? So, she tells her, the psychiatrist tells her, "Hey, I want you to tell me everything. It's confidential what you tell me." So she tells her everything from the time she was 3 to the time she was in the military. She says, "These beings protect me. They are always with me. They give me information. And they're my friends." And the psychologist says, "Okay, well, thanks for the interview. Let's move forward." And that interview ended. They cleared her to go back to work, back to West Berlin. They said she's fine, there's nothing wrong with her psychologically, even though they seemed like there was something going on. But jumping ahead, Katie gets discharged from the Air Force. She served her 6 years. She left, and she got a job in Albuquerque, New Mexico, at a biological research company. And during that time, she's out for a walk, out in the desert, and she sees this light coming towards her. This light lands right in front of her. These two beings come out. They're in silver spacesuits with silver helmets on. She knows immediately that these are not her friends. She gets a horrible feeling. She starts to turn and run back the other way. As she's running back the other way, these two are closing in on her. As she gets closer to her car, a helicopter comes over the ridge. This helicopter lands, and these two beings basically disappear. She runs to the helicopter. She's like, "These two beings are chasing me." And they're like, "You're going to be all right, Katie." And all of a sudden she's like, "How do you know my name?" And she said, and the crew member said, "We know who you are. We've been following you for a long time." And they're like, "You're actually lucky we got here when we did, because those aliens would have eaten you." That's what Doty says. Office of Special Investigations officer says that Katie would have been eaten by these beings. Eaten. Okay? Eaten, dude. Not abducted, not killed. Eaten. How would they know that? This makes me think that the military is using the yellow cube for their military experiments and for their missions. They know what certain events are going to happen and who they need to monitor. They knew they needed to monitor Katie because she had these capabilities. She was able to tap into alien consciousness, and they needed to follow her. So I think they used the yellow cube, which can predict with 99% certainty someone's future. So I believe they had precognitive ability on this particular event that she was going to get attacked by these beings, and they sent out a chopper to go get her and pick her up. That's my theory. So when they landed, the ETs left, And Katie's like, well, what happens now? Like, what do I do? Like, how am I gonna, survive? These things are gonna come after me. And the crew member said, you're gonna leave. We're gonna leave. We're gonna get you in the vehicle. Those beings are gonna leave. And a couple days later, OSI agents come to her door, and one of them is none other than Richard Doty, who's telling us the story. So he knows exactly about Katie and what she's capable of and how she was able to operate. He said they followed her from the time she joined ROTC, early on in her college career. We didn't know, how she was different, but they knew that she had abilities that were beyond human capability. For example, to be able to tell, what's going on with enemies, what's going on with certain individuals, that she was communicating with entities. So this was before DNA testing. However, he states that's important. So we'll get to that in a second. And he says the government had other methods to determine if a human and an ET had a connection. And so that's really interesting. Not just DNA, but they had another way. He can't release it, but he says they had another way of figuring it out. They were able to track and follow her. And when she got out of the service, they continued to follow her, life, and see what was going to happen, see if she was going to come in contact. And Doty says, we just knew where you were going to be, and we knew that you were going to be in trouble. And she says, okay. But she stated that, these friends that she had did not want to engage with the OSI, which is interesting. After their initial interview with her, they wanted her to show them that these things were real, that they could present themselves, they could, prove that they were real. They wouldn't do it. She went into a trance and had her eyes roll back, her eyelids roll back, and she was completely frozen for 30 to 40 seconds. And she stated that she communicated with her alien friends. They did not want to communicate with them. They had hostile thoughts in their minds. That the humans, the OSI agents, had hostile thoughts in their minds. They did not want to communicate with them. So that's really interesting. So as that goes on, as they go on, they say, hey, you know what? We know you have a job, and we know you liked being in the Air Force. We can get you into another area of intelligence, which would be with the Office of Special Investigations. And she immediately jumps on. She's like, yeah, I'm down with it. I'll get into it. So they hire her as a contractor. So initially starts off as part-time and then eventually becomes full-time. So she starts to work on these missions. And Emery's like, well, what were the missions? What exactly were the missions? And he says, well, let me tell you. We had her find people that were like her. And who is that? Professor X, right? So how do they know she's capable of this, right? Well, they subjected her to some different blood work, different tests, and that piqued her interest. She said, hey, I'm okay with it. She cooperated, and so they did the test, and they found out that during the test, along with psychologists and scientists, that the readings that they took helped determine patterns of behavior, patterns of thought, that allowed them to compare those to humans. And they found out that the person that they had, Katie, was not human, actually. She was actually some sort of human hybrid. Her brain activity far exceeded anyone else on the planet that they had tested. She was part ET, part human. When Doty confronted her with that, she said, yeah, they've told me that they've been with me all my life and that I was probably one of them. She just assumed that she was one of them, which is really interesting. She said that somehow they put me in this body. She told them something quite fascinating, that sometimes I feel very uncomfortable in this body. Isn't that interesting? It's almost as if they did that liquid consciousness that Randy Kramer was talking about, where they can take your consciousness, it's liquid, quantum liquid, and pour it into another body. Dodie asked her about her past life experiences. Did she remember those? And she stated that she had multiple dreams where she was on another planet with these beings that lived in huts that looked like gray aliens. And she stated that she was human in these dreams and that she was the only one. And she felt like that was her home, but she was still human. And so she felt very awkward being here on the planet. And so that's why they were able to confirm through blood tests, through brain activity, and many other testing that she actually was part ET, part human. So Dodie pitches her and he says, "Hey, we want you to become part of this team. Let's do this." And she's like, "Yeah." And he's like, "You feel comfortable with this? Your friends feel comfortable with this?" "Oh yeah, that's fine." So it's a win-win for the gray entities or whoever she's with, because they get access to all the details that OSI has. It's a no-brainer, right? So he tells her, "Hey, we want you to go out and we want you to find people like you." One of the first operations that they had was to find two people, a male and female, wherever they could go. So he says, he says, "Let's go out." And he says, "I want you to find the ones that are maybe under control of extraterrestrial influence, like you." And she said, "Oh, of course. They're all around me. We can find them. No problem." He says in a matter of 2 hours, they were able to locate multiple people. They went to a mall, in Coronado Mall in Albuquerque, and she pointed out people in the mall who were interfacing with aliens. So multiple agents tracked these individuals down, interviewed them, asked them questions, asked them who they were. Were they actually human? Did they have an ID? Where did they live? What's their backstory? Because what they wanted to find out, the ultimate reason they wanted to do this, was to find out if these people were interacting with these grays who didn't seem to be hostile, or if they were interacting with hostile aliens that the OSI office was aware of. Because if they were going to take them in. They were going to take them in because they know how to deal with these hostile aliens. And what's interesting is that CADY, the way they view CADY is that she is an alien in the human body. And that's how she's explained her situation. So these other species could potentially be in a human body, look very human, but they would actually have the soul of the ETs inside of the human body. Now, Emery Smith asks, "Hey, is it possible that these the aliens inside human bodies would look different somehow?" And Dodie did say that there's some differences, not many, but some. For CADY, she didn't have anything on the outside. It was like internal organ stuff. But other people, they might have some sort of deformity that would be more apparent. So I found that really fascinating because a lot of times you get these weird, creepy vibes from people, and I'm not saying that they're not human, but you might get a weird vibe from somebody not because they're a weird human, but because they're a weird alien. And I've often thought that my ex would be an alien with how hostile she was. I think she could have been a hostile alien. But later on, they developed DNA tests for testing people. And they did the test on CADY later on. And all the other individuals that she found. And they did tests on all of them to see who was legit, who wasn't. And they came up with 12. Just at the time, just in the OSI office. Okay, this is just the OSI office. So he stated we tested them. And lo and behold, CADY had the alien DNA. And it was legit. So he kind of wraps up his story there, but he states that CADY still is alive and well in New Mexico, still working for the Office of Special Investigations for the Air Force. he said that she's still helping, she's still doing well, um, and he kind of goes on to that story about how he wanted to really communicate with these aliens and have them present and show up in a secure building, but they wouldn't do it because they didn't want to show themselves or potentially cause themselves problems. So they let it go. But he did ask about humanity. He asked about whether or not humanity was safe, and she said yes. And he asked her, were these aliens guardian angels? And she made it a very definitive no, they are not angels. So it made him think, and he's kind of kicking himself now. He's like, why didn't I ask her about angels? Because he wasn't really interested particularly in angels. He just wanted to kind of rule it out. But he's like, I should have asked her if there were angels. Um, but the way that she gave out that answer made him think that there were angels out there because she was very definitive about it. Um, and yeah, that's really kind of the story that he gives. Wrapping it up in 20 minutes here. But yeah, it's a fascinating story. I think that episode's like 40 minutes long. So yeah, check it out if you want. But yeah, very fascinating stuff. So I like Doty. I think he's an interesting dude, and I think he's legit. And they do their due diligence with Gaia. They check people out. They make sure that they're legit. So, what do you think about this CADY story? Was she Professor X? She was clearly able to identify multiple people, not just one or two, but she identified at least 12. That's just what we know of. That's just what Doty's telling us. Maybe there's some more classified info. Maybe they found more. Maybe he's just saying they found 12 that day. But it goes to show you that there are special individuals out there, maybe not human, 100%, but they can tell whether or not these individuals are human or not, and they can find these individuals with these special abilities and point them out to our government so that we can do our due diligence on them and test them out. And basically, if you think about it, it's kind of like the Men in Black, where they basically tracked all the aliens that were on the planet at any given time. And that's kind of like what CADY was doing for them. She was showing them so they could track them and see which species they were involved with. Really fascinating stuff. So I'm gonna let you go. I got a few more things to wrap up. So I hope you guys have a great night. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. Think about it. Chew on it for a bit. Take care of yourself spiritually, physically, emotionally, following through on your hobbies and your goals and your dreams. And as always, continue to question the universe around you. Until next time, guys, take care. Lockdown Universe is out.